I'm 82 years old, and last Tuesday I finally understood something that took me 8 decades to see. I was sitting in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I raised 3 kids, celebrated 40 anniversaries, and buried a marriage, when my granddaughter asked me a question that stopped my heart. She said, "Grandpa, if you could go back and change one thing about your life, what would it be?" And I froze, because the answer that came to me wasn't what I expected. It wasn't about the promotion I didn't get, not the money I lost in '08, not even the argument I had with my brother before he died. It was something so simple, so ordinary, that I'd spent my entire life ignoring it. And I'm about to tell you what it is. But first, I need to tell you how I got here, because if you're watching this, chances are you're making the same mistake I did. And I don't want you to wake up at 82 wondering where it all went. For most of my life, I believed I knew what mattered. Work hard, provide for your family, build something, leave a legacy. I was a mechanical engineer, spent 37 years at the same company, good salary, decent reputation. I designed parts for tractors, nothing glamorous but honest work. Every morning, I'd kiss my wife goodbye, drive 40 minutes to the plant, and spend 9 hours at a desk solving problems that, frankly, no one outside that building cared about. But I told myself it mattered. I told myself I was building something. My father had worked in a factory his whole life, came home exhausted every night, hands stained with grease, barely said 2 words at dinner. I swore I'd do better. I'd have a clean job, a career, something to be proud of. And I did. I wore a tie, had an office with my name on the door. People asked for my opinion in meetings. I thought that meant I'd made it. Weekends, I was fixing the deck, mowing the lawn, organizing the garage. There was always something that needed doing. My son, Michael, used to ask me to play catch in the backyard. I'd say, "Not now, bud. I gotta finish this." He'd ask again the next weekend, maybe later. And then one day, he just stopped asking. I didn't even notice when it happened. My daughter, Sarah, she was different, quieter. She used to bring me drawings she'd made in school, little crayon sketches of our family, our dog, the house. She'd stand next to my chair while I read the newspaper and wait for me to look. And I would look for about 5 seconds. "That's real nice, honey," I'd say, and go back to reading. Eventually, she stopped bringing them to me. She'd show Linda instead. And I told myself it was fine. Kids grow up, they get independent. That's natural. But there's something I need to tell you, something I didn't realize until much, much later. And it's going to sound strange, but stick with me. Because the moment I thought I'd finally made it, the moment I retired, collected my pension, and sat down to enjoy the life I'd worked so hard to build, that's when everything fell apart. Not in the way you'd expect. There was no tragedy, no illness, no financial collapse. It was something quieter, something far more dangerous. But before I explain what that was, I need to take you back to the day it all started to crack. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember because Thursdays used to be my favorite day at work, payday. But this was 3 months into retirement. I was sitting in my recliner. The TV was on, but I wasn't watching it. My wife, Linda, was at her book club. The house was quiet. And I realized something. I had nothing to do. Not in the I'm relaxed way, in the I have no idea who I am without a job way. For 37 years, my identity was my work. I was the guy who showed up, the guy who solved problems, the guy who never missed a deadline. My colleagues used to joke that I'd probably die at my desk. I laughed along, but secretly I was proud of that. I thought it meant I mattered. And now I was just a guy in a chair, watching reruns of a show I didn't even like. That's when the thought hit me. What did I actually do with my life? I'd worked for decades, saved money, built a home, raised kids. But when I looked back, I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt alive. Not busy, not productive, alive. And here's the thing that scared me the most. I started making a list of moments I could actually remember, moments that made me feel something real. And you know how many I came up with? 11 moments in 82 years. I won't tell you all of them yet, but I'll tell you this. None of them were at work. None of them were accomplishments, and almost all of them involved people I'd taken for granted. One was the day Michael was born. I remember holding him for the first time, this tiny, wrinkled thing, and feeling terrified and amazed all at once. Another was a random Tuesday when Sarah was maybe 6 years old. We were driving home from the grocery store, and she started singing along to a song on the radio. Off-key, wrong words, completely joyful. And I remember thinking, I want to remember this forever. But then I didn't. I forgot about it for 40 years until I sat down and forced myself to remember. There was the night Linda and I danced in the kitchen to some old jazz record. No reason, just because. And the camping trip where Michael and I stayed up late looking at the stars. And he asked me if I thought aliens were real. And we talked about it for an hour like it was the most important question in the world. These weren't big moments. They were ordinary, forgettable even, but they were the only ones that stuck. The promotions, the projects, the deadlines I stressed over for weeks, I can't remember any of them, but there was one moment on that list that changed everything, and I'm going to tell you about it in just a minute, because it's the reason I'm making this video. 6 months after I retired, my best friend, a guy named Tom, died of a heart attack. He was 79, healthy, active, just gone. Tom and I had known each other since high school. We'd gone through everything together. First job, marriages, kids, divorces in his case, remarriage, grandkids. We'd meet up for coffee every few weeks, talk about sports, politics, whatever. But here's the thing I realized after he died. I couldn't remember a single conversation we'd had, not one. I'd spent 50 years talking to this man, and I couldn't tell you what we talked about because I was never really there. I was thinking about work, about what I needed to do later, about whether I'd left the garage door open. I went to his funeral, and I'll never forget what his daughter said during the eulogy. She talked about how her dad used to take her fishing every Saturday morning when she was a kid, how he'd wake her up at 5 a.m., and they'd drive out to the lake in his old truck, and he'd let her pick the spot. She said those mornings were the happiest memories of her life, not because they caught anything, but because he was there, fully there. No distractions, no phone, no agenda, just presence. She told a story about one particular morning when it was pouring rain. She was maybe 10 years old, and she said, "Dad, we can't fish in this weather." And Tom said, "Sure we can. We'll just get wet." So they went anyway. They didn't catch a single fish. They were soaked. She said her mom was furious when they got home, but she remembered it. 40 years later, she remembered it because her dad had shown her that being together mattered more than being comfortable. And I sat in that church pew listening to her voice crack with grief and gratitude, and I thought, when was the last time I was fully present with anyone? Not half listening while thinking about work, not checking my watch, not mentally drafting my to-do list for the next day. When was the last time I was there and I couldn't remember? I drove home from that funeral in silence. Linda asked me if I was okay. I lied and said yes, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Tom, about his daughter, about those Saturday mornings, and I realized something that shook me to my core. I had Saturday mornings too. I had a son who wanted to play catch, a daughter who used to ask me to read her bedtime stories, a wife who used to invite me on walks, and I said no, not because I didn't love them, but because I thought there'd always be time later. There wasn't. Michael's in his 40s now, lives 2 hours away, has kids of his own. Sarah moved to Oregon. We talk on holidays, maybe birthdays, and Linda, she's still here, still invites me on walks. But somewhere along the way, she stopped expecting me to say yes. That's what happens when you say no enough times. People stop asking. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I made a phone call, and what happened next is the reason I'm sitting here at 82 years old trying to tell you something I wish someone had told me when I was your age, because it changed everything. Not in some dramatic movie-like way, but in a way that made me realize I'd been living my entire life backward. Let me explain. I called my son, Michael, the one who used to ask me to play catch. He's 47 now, lives 2 hours away. We talk maybe twice a year. I asked him if he wanted to grab lunch. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. He sounded surprised, maybe even suspicious. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Like the only reason I'd call would be if something was wrong, and maybe he was right. But he said yes. We met at a diner halfway between our houses, and for the first time in I don't know how long, I didn't have an agenda. I wasn't trying to give advice. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I just asked him about his life, and he told me. He told me about his job, how he's stressed, overworked, feels like he's drowning. He told me about his kids, my grandkids, and how he worries he's not spending enough time with them. He told me about how his oldest son, Jake, asked him to come to a school play last month, and he missed it because of a work meeting. He told me he feels like he's failing, and I saw myself in him. The same trap, the same lie. I'll have time later. I watched him talk, and I saw the way his hands moved, and I realized he does this thing where he rubs his thumb against his fingers when he's anxious. I'd never noticed that before, my own son, and I didn't know he did that. So I told him about Tom's funeral, about the fishing trips, about the Saturday mornings, and then I told him something I'd never said out loud before. I said, I spent 40 years waiting for my life to start, waiting to have enough money, enough time, enough something, and I missed it. I missed you. He didn't say anything for a long time. I thought maybe I'd said too much, made it weird. But then he looked up at me, and his eyes were red. And he said, I used to think you didn't like me very much. That broke something in me. What? When I was a kid, he said, I thought I wasn't good enough because you never had time. You were always busy. And I figured if you really wanted to spend time with me, you would have. I didn't know what to say because he was right. Not about not liking him, but about the message I'd sent, that everything else was more important. And then he asked me, so what do we do now? And I realized that was the question. Here's what I've learned. What matters isn't the big things. It's not the promotion, the house, the savings account. It's not even the milestones, the graduations, the weddings, the awards. What matters is the small, ordinary moments you choose to be present for. The Tuesday morning coffee with your partner where you actually talk. The 10 minutes you spend listening, really listening, to your kid talk about their day. The walk you take just because the weather's nice. The phone call you make just to say, I was thinking about you. These moments don't feel important when they're happening. They don't come with applause. They don't go on your resume. But when you're 82, sitting in a quiet house, trying to remember what made your life worth living, those are the only moments that matter. Not the ones you were supposed to remember, the ones where you were there. I'll give you an example. Last month, my granddaughter, Emily, Michael's daughter, she came over to visit. She's 14, into art, barely talks to adults. She sat on the couch scrolling through her phone while Linda made tea. And normally, I would have just sat there too. Let her do her thing. Figured teenagers don't want to talk to their grandpa. But I thought about Tom, about those Saturday mornings. So I asked her what she was looking at. She showed me some app where people draw things. And I said, can you show me how to do that? She looked at me like I'd grown a second head, but then she did. For the next hour, she taught me how to use this app. We drew these ridiculous cartoons, laughed at how bad mine were, and at the end, when she was leaving, she hugged me, really hugged me. Not the quick, obligatory kind. And she said, thanks, Grandpa. That was fun. It was 1 hour, one ordinary hour, but I'll remember it for the rest of my life. So here's what I wish I'd known at 30, at 40, at 50. Stop waiting for permission to live. You don't need more money, more time, more success. You need to decide right now what actually matters to you, and then protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. After that lunch with Michael, we started a tradition. Every other Sunday, We meet for breakfast. No phones, no agenda, just us. And you know what? It's become one of the best parts of my week, not because we talk about anything profound, but because I'm there, and he's there, and that's enough. Sometimes we talk about his kids. Sometimes we just eat pancakes and complain about the weather. Last week, he told me about a fight he had with his wife. Nothing serious, just one of those stupid arguments married people have. And I didn't give him advice, didn't try to fix it. I just listened. And afterwards, he said, "Thanks, Dad." For what? Listening? Yeah, for listening. That's all it took. I also started doing something else. I started saying yes more. My granddaughter asks me to play a board game. Yes. Linda wants to take a drive with no destination. Yes. A neighbor invites me for coffee. Yes. Because I finally understand. Every no is a moment you'll never get back. And here's what nobody tells you about getting old. You don't suddenly become wise. You don't suddenly figure it all out. You just run out of time to pretend you have time. I look at pictures of myself at 30, at 40, at 50, and I want to shake that guy. I want to tell him, stop mowing the lawn and go play catch with your son. Stop organizing the garage and read your daughter a story. Stop watching TV and dance with your wife in the kitchen. But I can't. That guy's gone. All I can do is tell you, because maybe you're that guy right now. Maybe you're 30, 40, 50, and you're telling yourself the same lies I did. I'll have time later. I just need to get through this busy season. Once I achieve X, then I'll focus on what matters. Let me tell you something. There is no later. There is no once things calm down. This is your life right now, not someday, now. And every moment you're not present is a moment you're losing forever. Remember earlier when I said my granddaughter asked me what I'd change about my life? Here's what I told her. I said, I'd stop waiting. I'd stop thinking I had time. And I'd pay attention to the people I love while I still had them. She looked at me and said, "You still have us, Grandpa." And I realized she's right. I'm 82, but I'm not done yet. I can't get back the Saturday mornings I missed with Michael. I can't get back the drawings Sarah stopped showing me. I can't get back the walks Linda stopped inviting me on. But I can show up now, and so can you. Look, I don't know how old you are. Maybe you're 25 and think you have all the time in the world. Maybe you're 55 and starting to feel it slip away. Either way, I'm telling you, you don't have as much time as you think. Not because life is short, but because most of us spend it half asleep. We spend it distracted, busy, waiting for some future moment when we'll finally have permission to be happy. That moment doesn't exist. The only moment that exists is this one. So here's my challenge to you. Think about the people you love, the ones you keep meaning to call, to visit, to really talk to, and do it today. Not because something bad might happen, but because something good might happen. You might remember what it feels like to be alive. You might have a conversation you'll remember 40 years from now. You might give someone a memory they'll carry for the rest of their life. And here's the thing, you won't know which moments those are when they're happening. That's the whole point. They're not the big, obvious ones. They're the random Tuesday afternoon, the spontaneous decisions, the times you said yes when it would have been easier to say no. I'm 82 years old, and I just figured out what actually matters. Don't wait as long as I did, because the moments you think are ordinary, those are the ones you'll wish you could relive. And by the time you realize that, they're already gone.